With Green Day, we sort of started off as just like as a punk rock band, and I think that element's always been with us. And then we've been able to do things like American Idiot and 21st Century Breakdown, where there's like rock operas, but now I feel like it's a time to just even dig deeper into the history of rock and roll, whether it's like Motown or glam rock or anything from T-Rex and Mott the Hoople to Martha and the Vandellas. So it's just something to make like kind of just something that can lift your spirits musically. So, it's we hope we're successful at it. So.
All right, everyone. So we're gonna get started with this discussion. With me, actually, I have someone who's new to the new videos, I guess, the new format of the channel. Nicholas Stohler.
This album is ass.
But yeah, so he hasn't been on any of the new videos yet, which is pretty cool. So this is like his
This
first
is my first
appearance
video on your channel.
So, like the title suggests, we're going to be talking about Green Day's album "Father of All." So, where were you when this album came out as a Green Day fan? Like, what was your expectations for it? Were you excited and just all that?
It's just kind of like I wouldn't say it was new because I'm not as big as a Green Day fan than I am now, obviously.
Yeah.
I was expecting them to kind of go back to their more punk roots, because recently their new stuff really hasn't been that, rock alternative kind of stuff.
I mean, that makes sense because Revolution Radio was more of a pop punk record, more leaning toward the pop side than the punk side, which really isn't something new for Green Day because they did do that before with the Uno Dos Tres trilogy and even on some stuff on 21st Century Breakdown. But Revolution Radio, even with that album being a more back to basics record, still kind of leaned more towards the pop side. So I get that. And then when they announced this album alongside the Hella Mega Tour with Fall Out Boy and Weezer, I did kind of expect it to be a more punkier album because, touring with Fall Out Boy and Weezer, I kind of expected it to be, that, because if you're going on a big stadium tour, you would want stuff like more punky to kind of rile the crowd up. But when that first single dropped, I got scared. So in terms of my fandom, where I was with this album, I had been a Green Day fan for about a year and a half. They were really the band that got me into rock music, so I was really excited when I heard they were dropping a new album, and the tour, which I was really excited to maybe go see. Of course, I got delayed to this year, so whatever. But I remember I was coming home from school and I saw that the first single, the title track, "Father of All," had dropped. And I checked it out, and honestly, I didn't care for it that much at first. I didn't like it. First of all, his vocals are really different on this song. Billy Joe's vocals are really high. Come on, honey.
Yeah, it's really weird to hear him do that.
And I like that Green Day was able to take a different approach with this album, which we'll talk about later, but it definitely threw me for a loop at first. But over time, listening to it, this is actually probably my favorite on the album. Either my first or my second favorite on the album. It's actually a really good song, in my opinion. Definitely the song that probably paid off the most. It has a really catchy chorus. And overall, I think it's the best on the album.
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of
I
quality.
wouldn't say it's the most punk kind.
Definitely not.
But overall, like, in terms of, like, the music, it was actually really not that bad of a song. It's probably my top 3 of its album.
It's a really good song, definitely for me in my top 3. But I remember when that came out, it kind of threw me for a loop. But overall, I grew to get used to it. But then I saw the album cover. Now, here's the thing with this album. Father of All is not the actual title. The actual title of the album is Father of All Motherfuckers. But of course, you can't have that as like an actual title in stores. So they censored it by putting the flaming unicorn on the front cover. Which, this cover is the worst cover this band has ever had. This thing is ugly.
It's really artistic, but it's just a zoomed-in picture of the American Idiot cover with a bunch of, like, random stuff all over it. It's so... Okay, I don't know the best... Okay, it's really autistic.
It's really
retarded. It's autistic, retarded, alright? It's literally the Jacob Wells of all single...
I mean, you're not wrong at all. This cover looks like it was made... It looks like a kindergarten project gone wrong. The word Green Day looks like it's been written in ketchup. It pretty much looks like some graffiti artist just took a picture of the American Idiot cover and just wrote all over it. And not to mention, the censoring is so awful. and I get the unicorn is like the main theme of this album because before this album came out, Billy Joe was like, nothing says fuck you like a unicorn, like awful. But I think it just looks so bad. I mean, without the unicorn, it would still look bad, but they just slap the unicorn on there. It adds nothing to the style of the cover at all. It just,
But it does add to the distortion pedal, which I got to try. Just saying.
oh yeah, they released the pedal, the Dookie pedal, which is pretty cool. There are 3 singles from this thing: Fire Ready Aim and Oh Yeah being the second and third singles respectively. And honestly, the singles just got worse for me. Fire Ready Aim is probably the most generic song they've ever made. It was used in the NHL hockey commercials, and that's one thing we'll get into with this album. Like, all these songs sound like they could be in like the background of like a car ad or something.
Oh, it actually does.
Overall, I think that whenever I first heard this album, whenever you first heard the full album, because first of all, this album's only 26 minutes. This is like EP length in terms of like minutes. How did you feel after hearing the whole thing for the first time?
Depressed. I had a gun in my left hand. It was a pump shotgun, and it was loaded. Yeah, I thought about putting it to my head so long.
So whenever I first heard this album, this was the first Green Day album I was really a part of. So I think my excitement overclouded my judgment, because whenever I first listened to this album, I loved it. I was really into it. I loved every song, except really Oh Yeah and Junkies on the High. But everything else I really liked, and I would listen to it all the time. But over this last year, especially with a bunch of bands I like coming up with new music, I realized how mediocre of an album this is. I probably would put this as their worst album, even underneath the Uno Dos Tres stuff. Because at least Uno Dos Tres, they're full, concise albums, and they do have a lot of good songs on each of the albums, even though the albums as a whole aren't that great. But this album is the most disappointing album I think I've ever been a part of. It's probably the worst album I've ever been a part of. It's very boring. It's very bland, very generic.
The only song that I really liked was Teenage Teenager.
Yeah, I wish I was. What the fuck was the song called? I Was a Teenage Teenager. I like that song a lot. I do like that song a lot. Here's the thing, though. A lot of people say that Green Day never changes their sound, which is bullshit. Don't believe that. Green Day changes their sound all the time. I guess in their early stuff, it was kind of more samey. But American Idiot and 21st Century Breakdown mix it up. Uno Dos Tres kind of mix it up album by album. Revolution Radio was kind of a back to basics, so I'm not surprised that they went a different direction for this album.
Because I'm not sure, I don't think this album did really well, or I could be wrong, but
in its first week of release, it sold 48,000 album copies, and it sold less. It sold less than Trey, which before then Trey was their least selling album. That sold 170,000 units. This is their worst selling album since their independent label days. Since fucking like 39 Smooth and Kerplunk. That's embarrassing.
Wait, did Kerplunk sell better?
Kerplunk has gone platinum, but it didn't whenever it performed. It's one of, if not the biggest selling independent album ever. It's sold at least 100. It sold at least 1 million copies. It's gone platinum. But in terms of total sales, it hasn't reached a million yet. I'm sure by now it's hit like a gold status, but I'd be surprised if it's actually hit 1 million. This album kind of had anti-hype around it, where everyone was anticipating it, but not for the right reasons. They were anticipating this album to be bad. They were anticipating this thing to be garbage, and they were pretty much right. I mean, none of these songs really stand out. They're all really generic. And the thing is, this is a 26-minute album. This album is 26 minutes long, and a really big thing I have with this album is that it goes by so fast.
Yeah.
It's really hard to pay attention to it because, one, these songs are really generic. They're not really offering much to the table. Two, there's not a single song in this album that goes over 4 minutes. Most of these songs are like 2.5 minutes long, with the longest being I Was a Teenage Teenager, which is like 3 minutes and 40-something seconds. But even then, that's short. So it kind of just goes in one ear and out the other, and you completely forget about it once you're done. Every single time I've come back to this album, which I did come back to this album recently because I was planning on making this video, and it's probably the least I've enjoyed an album in a long, long time. There's some songs I like, there's some songs I don't like, but it's overall probably the most generic and boring album I've ever listened to. Even in consideration with it being only 26 minutes, It might just be the fastest cringe of an album I've ever listened to.
It was really fast. Most albums are about like, I'd say like 15 minutes or so. No,
Yeah.
they like completely cut that in half, like half of a regular album.
It's more of an EP, really.
It
If this was like cut off 3 songs, this would be an EP. It's an EP's length of an album. I think it's so quick. It's so quick, which I think also added to people's expectations because they saw the length of the album, and they're like, "This is how are they going to make a quality release in 26 minutes?"
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, the production kind of like, I feel like they only had like a week of production or something. Even then, like Nirvana only had like a week or two for production of an Euro, and it's still like, how long is an Euro? It's like 15 minutes or something like that.
Like 40 something minutes, but that's a way better album than this is. Here's the thing with this: whenever they did Uno Dos Tre, Dos is the second album, and it's more of a garage rock album. They kind of went in more of a garage rock direction for Dos, and it didn't really pay off because a lot of the songs still sounded the same as Uno. And honestly, I think that Father of All is kind of what Dos should have been. Because, like I said, Dos was leaning towards more garage rock sounds. And so I think if they had taken maybe some of the sounds from Father of All, or like did that back then, extended the length, and got rid of Nightlife, because fucking Nightlife, no, it's so bad. I think that Dos would have been better received because it would have fit the direction that they were trying to go for. But instead we got a very mediocre album. And I think that also if these songs were labeled as Foxborough Hot Tubs, they would be more accepted because this is what more of the Green Day side project sound. In like 21st Century Breakdown there, they did a band called Foxborough Hot Tubs, which sounds a lot like the stuff on Father of All. So I think this album would have been better received if it wasn't under the Green Day name and was a little bit longer. Even then, it still wouldn't be very good, but at least there's better context around it.
Album, you know? Like you said, I think it should have been a part of the Uno Dos Tres trilogy, and I think we should have got something along the lines of 21st Century Breakdown, you know? Because it kind of mixed it up a little bit, or something like Revolutionary Radio, which is probably their last good album. And, you know, because, like, we really don't need this, you know? It's not worth a whole album. The album work is cringe. I mean,
a lot of people are saying that Green Day's fallen off. And to be honest, I never got why people didn't like Revolution Radio. I thought Revolution Radio is, in my opinion, in their top 5 best albums. Yeah. I think that's a really good album. Uno Dos Tre, take it or leave it. I personally don't mind the trilogy. And a lot of people don't like 21st Century Breakdown, which I don't understand because it's one of my favorites. So a lot of people seem to say that Green Day hasn't really made an amazing album or a good album since 2004. And I disagree, but coming off, if this is what they're making now, I can definitely see them falling off later on because no one was excited for this because the anti-hype was so high with this release. There were people that were saying that this was going to be the worst album of the year before the album even came out. But I do think that it is a really underwhelming album. I think it's a very pointless album. Sugar Youth is probably the most Green Day sounding song on the album. It's like a minute long.
Okay, Teenage Teenager kind of sounds like if they made a remix of something like from 2006 or so, and they remixed it to make it sound more new. That's what I think it sounds like.
Overall, there's really not much else to say about this album. Whenever I originally listened to it, I probably gave it like an 8 or a 7, I think is what I gave it. But looking back on it now, this is going to get like a 2 or a 1.5. There's nothing special about this album. Don't waste your time on it.
Like a really decent song. I actually kind of put it on my playlist.
Yeah, it's the worst album they've ever made. Don't waste your time on it. Don't get overly excited to listen to it if you haven't. I do recommend checking it out so you form your own opinions. But other than that, there's nothing to really get excited about with this thing.
It's a really bad album, you know.
I get why I was excited for it. It was my first album by Green Day that I was a part of. They were the first band I really connected with, so it was cool to get a release from them. But I just wish it would have been something else.
I wasn't really excited when the album was dropping. I didn't really listen to it because I was just like, care enough because when I listened to the singles, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna die.
And I think that's how a lot of people felt. They just kind of ditched this album after they heard the singles, which I really do get. But I stayed up to hear it on release day. I wasn't disappointed because, you know, I was just, like I said, I let my excitement overcloud my judgment. But looking back on it now, this is Green Day's worst album. So yeah, closing thoughts on Father
Yeah,
of
I'm
All.
gonna
You
rate
got a
this
rating or anything?
a -1 to a light 0.
Oh. So it's been 1 year since this album came out, or review or whatever. Nick, where can people find you? People already know who you are, but just plug whatever
Yeah,
you want to plug.
my
Go
YouTube
ahead.
channel's name is Nicholas Stohler. Just drop some stuff on Spotify. Just search up Nicholas Stohler on Spotify, and yeah.
And so that's pretty much gonna be it for this. Happy when you're the father of all, or maybe like
Bad year, father of all. Hope you die. Kill yourself.
Bad father of all.